I am also joining him as his sidekick, Eric Garcetti, and we are joined by Ed Reyes as well, our guest star. And we'll open up.
Him on this committee, and he'd show up,
Absolutely. Would be nice. Wednesday, January 14th, 2009. We're in room 1070, 3 p.m., a little bit after 3 p.m., 3:10, here in City Hall. And now it's time for general public comment. Do we have any general public comment? All right, we will close our general public comment. And if we can take up item 3, which Mr. Reyes has joined us for. Did you want to come and speak first, Mr. Reyes, and then we'll take up the items?
Shall I read the...
Please do. Let our listeners out there in the airwaves know what number 3 is.
This is a communication from the mayor's office relative to a list of infrastructure projects that would be eligible for President-elect Obama's proposed economic stimulus package to be adopted as part of the city's official legislative position, and priority projects that may also be eligible for President-elect Obama's proposed economic stimulus package.
And what did we say last time?
Recovery
and investment. See, we've even added more to it now.
The official record apparently needs to be revised.
Stimulus. All right, we will revise that. Mr. Reyes, always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Council President and Councilmember Zine. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you in this committee. It's great work you're doing here. I think we're at a very pivotal time, a historic time in our country, and we are in a position to find ways in which cities and urban centers can stimulate jobs and try to create the type of intervention that allows our communities to endure this economic downturn that we are all suffering. My purpose here is to offer a proposed set of projects that essentially would put the Los Angeles River's watershed management and Alley River implementation program in a comprehensive and systematic category for our ability to address water supply, water conservation, water recycling, water quality, flood management, and river revitalization to the economic stimulus package list. These projects must work together as building blocks essential to the city's public infrastructure growth and future development. River advocates, thousands of watershed supporters, and even the Los Angeles Times now realize that we must advocate for investment in cost-effective 21st century green infrastructure solutions and restoration projects that generates jobs and improve water quality and natural flood protection. Per recent analysis in the Alley River Master Plan, approved by the Council in 2007, revitalization of just 2 target areas reaches and could yield an additional new jobs of 10,900, annual wages earned of $507 million, annual sales revenue of $15 million, and annual property tax revenue of $48,200,000. Now, this analysis comes as a result of the great support that we've been able to garner from the council, the support from the mayor's office, but more importantly, it allows us to look at how we can renew ecologically, establish a legacy of a renewed ecologically functioning city. The green jobs in urban revitalization and restoration include construction, engineering, biologists, habitat specialists, watershed resource specialists, water quality monitoring, landscape designers, maintenance, trail, and rehabilitation. As for the river projects on the list, they are viewed as standalone projects, which could be funded or not. There's nothing tying them together to achieve our larger vision. The Bureau of Engineering should begin preparing a comprehensive phasing of the Los Angeles River Master Plan that would include, as a first phase, the projects that are already currently on the stimulus list before you today. The list that is right now identified by the Bureau of Engineering include a whole list. I won't go through each one of them, but there's at least 12 of them that have been identified. Future phases for implementation would be determined by the Bureau of Engineering consistent with the Alley River Master Plan and in consultation with the various agencies involved in implementation of this plan. Bottom line, colleagues, we are in a position to create jobs now. As you can see, the River Keepers is already in place. We already have jobs being developed. They are already cleaning up the riverways, are looking at the tributaries for cleanup maintenance programs. There's a 20 miles of river system. The River Keepers total project cost is $2.1 million. Our request would be $1 million. That is now. If we got the stimulus package dollars now, we can start hiring youth in that program tomorrow. So when we talk about immediate short-term results, we can create that. we can put it within the context of a longer phased approach, and that should be under the umbrella of this river master plan. We know it's a multi-year program, but we also know that the river in the 30s was actually a job generator for then Roosevelt when he did his New Deal programs. The river actually was a stimuli for jobs back then. Today, we can use the very same river, redefine its purpose, increase its capacity, improve its ability to provide flood control while creating all the green industry related programs and projects that are affiliated with this river system. We can do that today. I believe the city should be in a position to package this vision in a very concrete way, so to speak, and looking at how we can economically create all these jobs is really in front of us. It's a matter of showing leadership. I thank you, Councilman Garcetti, for your advocacy in this area. I want to thank the mayor for his support and the council for continually providing the type of support that got us to this phase. I believe we can move forward with this plan. It would complement and mirror what the harbor is doing in their strategy and dealing with their strategies. And again, it has a regional impact. It has an impact that will create jobs immediately, real relief, and I believe it can be a demonstration project for other urban centers to increase jobs throughout this country. So I submit this with great respect. We got copies to you in a memorandum, and I'm hoping I can answer any questions. And we can hang on to our seats and maintain this composure of being proactive, because I know every day things change in Washington, D.C., and as they go through their turbulence, hopefully we can withstand those changes and be in a place where we can receive these dollars and create these jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. I don't have any questions. I know we've been able to talk about this, and thank you for this, and thank you for your leadership in moving this piece forward, including that. Mr. Zine, do you have any questions?
Just a couple. More than questions, compliments to Ed Reyes, who has been committed to this and spent countless hours, meetings, documents. I mean, your passion behind this is phenomenal, and I totally support it. I know it starts out in my district, and it goes that whole long distance. So you haven't forgotten the valley. You
Right.
included everyone along the way. But your vision for it with your background, urban planning and UCLA, and I think somehow when you go to sleep at night, you have this vision, and you're putting it into paper, and hopefully we can get this infusion dollars to get something rolling, because your commitment is phenomenal. I just want to acknowledge that you are staunchly not only concerned with your district, taking care of the day-to-day issues, but this major, huge project, which, as you say, it costs a lot of money, but employs a lot of people and brings in $1 revenue. So I just want to acknowledge what you've done, your leadership, your commitment, your dedication to it, and hopefully in the near future we'll see something happen, because you've spent a lot of time and energy in this project.
Well, with your support, Councilmember, and I thank you for those words, it truly is a reflection of the leadership we have here today. And I think it's also a credit to our ability to look beyond our term-limited experience and to look at the city and its welfare and the region for its needs in terms when it comes to water, but more importantly, how we can be constructive in creating jobs. President-elect's message is very clear. I think we can respond just as clearly. All we need is for us to speak with the Army Corps, speak with the various departments, agencies at the federal level, and clear the path for these dollars to come in so we can implement. And that is really the objective we have today.
Because when the ribbons are cut, everybody's going to sit there and be in the picture. And
We'll be in wheelchairs. No, just kidding.
well, I hope not. You'll be the person that did all the work to make it happen, and we'll be sitting there patting each other on the back with a great job. But
No.
you know, clearly, you're the one who's really carried the ball on this from the get-go. So hopefully this can happen, and with Mr. Garcetti's close relationship with the president-elect, maybe we can squeeze $1 million to get something rolling. Mr. Garcetti, council president, friend of.
I'll text him right now.
President-elect. You're going to have dinner with the president-elect, and you're going to be there for the inauguration, and we look forward to you taking care of Councilman Reyes on this project.
All right. You give me some empty money bags, and I'll see what I can do.
Don't feel the pressure, Council
No
President.
pressure, no pressure at all. Thank you very much, Mr. Reyes.
Okay. Thank you.
If we can invite the mayor's office forward to get an update as well. And saw the memo from the 7th. Thank you for that. And
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Jim Clark, Director of Federal Relations in the Mayor's Office, and I'm joined with Ted Allen with the Bureau of Engineering. As you mentioned, we redistributed the list of ready-to-go infrastructure projects, in part because when we had provided it to you prior to your recess, we had not yet had the projects from the LA Unified School District, the Los Angeles Community College District that are located within the City of Los Angeles, and the Housing Department hadn't given us their projects. So the list that you have includes those projects, and this is sort of a living list because we keep hearing from folks. We've wanted to try to see if we could even include some of the charter school in the projects that they have in the City of Los Angeles. One note with this, so the list is basically been expanded over the list that you had previously. There are some corrections that do need to be made. There were 2 studies and 1 public outreach program that need to be removed from the list because they are not obviously infrastructure projects. So we would ask that correction be made. We've done that in our databases as well. If I could, though, I'd like to give you a little context about the latest thinking on Capitol Hill, which is still very murky with respect to how they're going to deal with economic recovery. Though I think stimulus is back in now. I keep hearing. I heard Nancy Pelosi refer to it as recovery today, and I heard somebody else.
For legislative, so we're speaking to members of Congress. Stimulate them, please.
Right. We're still talking about the range of $775 billion to just under $1 trillion for the entire package. A major component of that is a middle-class tax cut of about $250 billion, of which $500 would go to individuals, $1,000 to families. Unlike how President Bush handled it, where there were checks that were given to people, this would actually be done through your withholding. So there'd be a reduction in the withholding tax, and over the period of a year, then you'd receive that money. One other suggestion that they wanted, that the President-elect made, of a tax credit for employers of $3,000 seems to be gaining no support at all on Capitol Hill, and appears that will be dropped, which would leave a hole of about $50 billion that they're thinking of other ways to spend that money. One of them would be to increase the contribution that's done to the federal Medicare assistance percentage that would benefit the county clearly with that. We haven't heard any difference in the numbers on infrastructure projects, still looking at the idea of it being around $45 billion, of which $30 billion of that money would be in the category of highways, roads, bridges, those kinds of things. And we still believe that they are looking at using existing funding mechanisms to do that, which would be the Surface Transportation Program is the mechanism for getting out the funds to that go to the states. And there's a formula that's based on how that money then gets distributed, and in part based on population. However, I did hear something just as recently as a half an hour ago whereby the members of the Appropriations Committee are in fact looking at creating some sort of sub-allocation requirement that would require that money gets down to the local level, but they may not want to use the existing funding structures. I know the state of California has had a proposal on the table that would basically be a one-third proposal, 1/3 of the money going to the state, 1/3 going to MTA or MPO organizations, and 1/3 going to cities and counties. When we did the calculation on that, we actually thought that we would lose more money than we would under the existing formulas. But the problem with the existing formula is that the time frame and all the hoops you have to jump through in order to be able to get the money down to the local level. And Chairman Oberstar with Transportation and Infrastructure is very adamant that if you don't start spending the money in 90 days, he's going to take it away. So and that's the latest that we hear. The other thing that I heard today that's disturbing is that apparently Chairman Obie of House Appropriations Committee has indicated that he is not going to put any money into community development block grants because of a perception that that would be seen as earmarks. Now, they've said that there would be no earmarks in the federal bill, but he believes that by putting money into existing categories with very tight controls on those, what types of projects they can be, that's better than, say, giving a mayor of a city a whole handful of money and allowing them to pick and choose the pet projects. This would have, if that's the case, this would have a dramatic impact upon the projects that we have on this list that we would be able to fund. It would, I don't know exactly, because I just found out this information, but I assume it would almost cut it in half, if not more, in terms of that. We've also heard, too, that this list that you've got, we're working off
It
of.
would cut it wouldn't cut the allocation. It would cut the eligibility. Of the
It
project?
would, yeah, exactly. The project wouldn't qualify. A lot of these projects are great projects, but they would need to qualify under being able to have the discretion to use CDBG funds to be able to do them.
So just to be clear, you can't use block grants to supplement this, or you wouldn't be able to use new block grant money.
We wouldn't be able to use, the type of project wouldn't qualify under some existing structure, so the reason we
Where it would for block
where it
grant.
would if we have the discretion then to be able to pick and choose which projects to use. Also, the list that we put together was a list based on, actually it was a little more than 180 days at the time. We thought there was going to be a bill on the desk of the president on January 20th or 21st. They're now looking at a commitment. Nancy Pelosi saying this morning is that February 13th is their date that they would like to have the bill done by. She said before the presidential recess. If it's not done, there will be no presidential recess for the Congress. But what that means is then that everything gets moved back. So actually the date of August 1st is probably less now than 180 days. But they're also still talking quite seriously about a 90-day, which again would limit the list. But the way we have the list set up, it's filtered in such a way that we can produce a list of, these projects ready to go in 35 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, et cetera, et cetera. The other concern that we have, too, is President-elect Obama said in his speech last Thursday, and we were hoping for more specifics, and there was pretty broad generalities, but he said, with the issue of energy efficiency, he talked about retrofitting federal office buildings. Well, that's great, but that doesn't mean then that money's going to come down to us to be able to do our retrofitting of our, street lights and things like that that we'd be doing. So we think this is a good list. As you also saw, too, I think in the paper today, the county has come out with a list. They have $2.7 billion worth of ready-to-go projects as well. So the real struggle will be once that the money comes down from D.C. to Sacramento is how the money gets distributed at that point and who all we have to compete with for the funds. And I'm
When it
happy.
goes to Sacramento, there's 25%, 30%?
Well, there's under the STP, the Surface Transportation Program, they take 10% off the top for what they call transportation enhancements, and then the rest of it is divided up population-wise. About 62% of it goes to cities and counties, and the remainder 38% of what remains goes to the state to use. And so there's this formula, and that's where we came up with. Actually, if it were to come out with $30 billion, the state would receive just a little under $3 billion. And if you use the STP formula, we would get somewhere at the city level, somewhere between $450 million to just slightly over $500 million for our projects that would qualify.
Okay.
In terms of the item that Mr. Reyes brought forward as well, in terms of some of the river revitalization master plan, how much of that is already folded in? And we did ask for kind of jobs created specific, so having that was helpful.
Yes, sir. That's one other thing, too. On your list that you didn't have before, we've put the jobs creation part of it that's attached to it, though realize this is basically using a dollar formula for how much the project is as to how many jobs it creates. It's not.
No, it is.
Yeah, it's not much more scientific than that. With respect to Councilman Reyes's projects, I think most all of them are listed, but what I like about his projects, and one of the things that the mayor has been speaking about and that we've been talking to both the leadership in the Congress and the Obama administration about, is something called a big and good fund, or an infrastructure bank that would be much like what they've done in the TARP, but hopefully run a lot better, where there could be a large infusion of money that could be put in for these large-scale projects that would generate lots of jobs and really, as opposed to what we may end up seeing is a lot of street repavings and sidewalk repairs and, street lights and those sort of things. So things such as Solar LA project or the Clean Truck program down at the port or a project like the LA River could be something that would be a great project for a big and good kind of fund. Unfortunately, while they're talking about it in the Obama administration, we haven't heard really anybody on the congressional side talking about that.
Okay. Well, if we can ask the CLA to just kind of cross-check and work with Mr. Reyes' office on those pieces that were detailed here and those ready-to-go kind of shovel-ready projects, and just make sure that those are included. If they're not, if we can forward that piece to add to the resolution that we adopted in December, which remains part of our legislative program right now. Let's see if there's anything else.
So are we forwarding the list to council for adoption? We would
we have
recommend
December.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be there. I'd like to keep the item here for updates, but also for the list to be able to go forward and actually have that be adopted.
So,
I mean, otherwise, we're not going to have an official position. This stuff's going to be moving the next couple of weeks.
Right.
So, I think it's probably appropriate for us to do that. So, if we can retain the item and we can get those updates here, I think it's going to be important for the city. Is there any unofficial lobbying going on from the city right now on this?
Oh, yeah.
On this particular-
Well, I mean, we're part of the larger that the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and the mayors participate with other mayors. In addition to lobbying on behalf of the big and good, we've also been part of our message, and hopefully that's something that the council would be supportive of as well, is that this idea that funding should get down to the local level, that we have serious, ready-to-go, shovel-ready projects that create jobs that are good for stimulating the economy. And so we'd much prefer to see projects done in the city of LA than, say, a road repaving project in Lassen County or something like that. So that's one item. The second item is that while the money is generally given out by the federal government without requiring any kind of match, and we're not asking for a match, we think, though, that self-help jurisdictions such as ourselves, people that are willing to tax themselves like we have for Prop R and other things like that, should get special benefits on these because we're willing to put our own money into these projects along with federal funds. And then the third item was the idea of creating a big and good fund to address some of these larger issues.
Okay. The reason I asked the question is I don't want us to get sideways from our own charter as well, and that's just something that we're trying to coordinate better. But I think we're all on the same message in terms of getting things to the city, and we're doing that individually. Mayor through the Conference of Mayors. Mr. Reyes is on the board now of the National League of Cities, where Mr. Zine resided for some time as well. And just making sure that we do that in conjunction is going to be critically important. Lobbying on specific items, yet we can't do until we adopt them. So,
right.
By the charter. So let's put in a position. If we see things that are different, we need to amend those. That's why I want to retain that here. We can always forward recommendations to change that as the rules change, but just so at least we have something specific to be legally in conformance with the charter lobbying for. I think it's good to move forward.
That was an issue I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
If the federal funding is going to the state and the state is adjusting their policy, we may need to make adjustments to our state legislative program.
Sure.
That would require additional resolution.
Okay.
So we'll watch for that.
We'll keep the item hot here, and we can make those resolutions and do them quickly, or even potentially waive them out as recommendations from the chair straight to council when we need to on that. But otherwise, I think it's time to move that list forward. Okay. With the additions, if we can cross-check with Mr. Reyes so that when it comes to council. Okay. Mr. Zine, anything else?
Just one question on the council districts. There's a list of the 15 districts. Was there any consideration given on a balance?
No, sir.
It was just what we have ready to go.
No, what we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to demonstrate that we had ready-to-go projects that could meet whatever the federal government would come down with as far as the requirements, and that and then we wanted as complete a list as possible because we didn't have such a list in the city of Los Angeles before. So there's been no consideration that way. Obviously, when you look at the amount of money that we're being asking for here, $18 billion, I think, of the total project costs, and $8 billion, and we may only see $450 million. We're going to have to make choices, and that process lies ahead of us.
Absolutely.
Too.
Yeah, Mr.
One other comment. Since we're adopting a position, and it's good for the current Congress, which is for 2 years, presumably this list is not merely for the infrastructure economic development effort underway now. It's it'll be good for the next 2 years. So it'll help us for lobbying at a future date.
Yeah, and we can always amend that too.
Well, I would mention too, this list is just a filtered list of a much larger list of
and it's not comprehensive either. It's not every project that we would lobby on, but we'll feel free to bring other ones forward from the mayor's office, from the departments, and other ones to adopt that. That's what we're trying to do this year, and part of going to the departments wasn't just to ask them what legislation they want, but if there's individual projects that department heads should be able to bring those to us. So I reiterate that to all of those general managers listening on the phone, because I'm sure they're all just doing that with bated breath with the Rules and Government Committee. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll both forward it and retain it. We can pull that, which is to retain the item on the agenda, but move forward the recommendation of the package to council. Does that make sense? I mean, we're forwarding part of it, and we'll continue the ongoing discussion on the rules and regulations around that. Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Item 1, please.
Item 1 is a CLA report relative to the city's position on legislative action that would amend the National Register of Historic Places federal program regulations to extend the time frame for allowable notification period to local governments. Christopher Concepcion with the CLA's office is here for a report as well, and Ken Bernstein with the Office of Historic Preservation is available as well.
All right. Mr. Concepcion.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chris Concepcion with the CLA's office. This item originated from a discussion that occurred between the council and the Department of City Planning, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And this is relative to amending or problems with the time frame that the states allow local governments to respond to National Register of Historic Places applications. And before you, in the report that you have, is a timeline a very tentative timeline that planning gave to us to include in the report. And as you can see from this timeline, we cut it very close in terms of submitting our response to the state. And even if we do get our responses to the state at that 58 days that you have there as your minimum, that doesn't guarantee that it's going to get there in time. It's going to go through the different state departments and actually get processed within that 60-day time period. So after review of this timeline and within the resolution, you see we're asking for an amendment to federal program regulations as well as to state administrative procedures that would allow for a greater time period for local governments to act or respond to National Register applications.
Okay. And I assume that you would like more time to be able to...
We would love more time. Ken Bernstein with the Office of Historic Resources in the Department of City Planning. This came about now that the city is a certified local government for historic preservation, which makes us eligible for state and federal grants for historic preservation planning. We also have the ability to comment on these National Register and California Register nominations to provide our input directly into those processes. We are not the decision maker, but we have an important advisory role. But those timelines are very tight, particularly given our multiple steps, the need to involve both our Cultural Heritage Commission as the local preservation commission and to comply with our intergovernmental relations policies involving the council and mayoral involvement in signing resolutions. Given that we only have 60 days in particular for National Register comments, we have 90 days for California Register nominations, which is slightly more possible. In 60 days, there are many steps to go through, so we would welcome additional time, and we welcome the resolution.
Okay, great. Mr. Zine, any questions? Go for it. All right, we'll go ahead and adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Without objection.
Item number 2 is a communication from the mayor relative to recommendations for the 2009-2010 federal legislative program in the areas of education, transportation, energy and environment, economic development, public safety, and opportunity and inclusion.
Okay. There's education, transportation. Okay. Sorry, just give me a second to look at these. So you've analyzed all these? Or?
The mayor's office is here, and they can make a comment on what they've provided. Our understanding is
Rely on our CLA just to make sure there's no,
Yeah.
you didn't see any red flags on them. I'm sure we're all simpatico, but.
Yeah, the mayor's office reviewed legislation that the city had taken a position on previously that had not been passed into law.
Okay.
What they did was they contacted they identified the key issues. They contacted the authors of those bills and asked if they would be introducing them again in the next year, and those legislators indicated they would. At this point, we don't know if those bills are going to move forward. We don't know what the language of those bills are going to be. And so our thought in conversation with the mayor's office is that we would watch the introduction of legislation. We would watch for these bills and topics specifically. And if the council would like to do so, you could direct us to prepare a report when those bills are introduced and bring that report to rules directly, rather than waiting for, to be asked to do so.
Okay. All right. Anything you want to run through in particular on them?
Jim
Okay.
Clark,
Yep.
Director of Federal Relations. Thank you. To piggyback on what John has already said, too, we wanted to be more proactive in our approach and really have a good sense of tracking these bills when they first get introduced. I can tell you that Congress has been in session for a week now. They have introduced 456 House bills in the House and 162 bills in the Senate. And we're tracking those. Our intern Viva Guerrero, who's here, that's her function to do. So we want to look forward to working closely with the CLA's office on it.
Ask her about any specific ones.
Yeah, you can tell she's going to get a test later. To work with CLA's office in identifying these things early on, so that we can get a position on them and have something to say about them while they're still in the formative process. But as expected, with a new president and a lot of new members in Congress, a lot of interest in introducing old bills and new bills, and so we expect quite a flood of legislation that will be then coming around to your offices asking you to serve as a sponsor for resolutions.
Okay. All right. Shazine, any questions about any of these?
Oh, great idea.
All right.
Great idea.
So in effect, this is a watch list. This is not a list that the city is adopting.
So can we direct you then to report to us on legislation that's identified in this when these bills are introduced, and if there are some, and they're really timely, we can always waive them out. So if you can just start plugging through them and let us know, and work in conjunction with what the latest is on these, and we will move them forward as appropriate on each of these. Okay,
That's great.
Great. Okay. One last thing on item 3 while you're here too. I'd asked the CLA in terms of some principles for legislation, and obviously because of the earmarks, no earmarks mentality, adopting a formal list is, I think, important for, I believe now, just for when they're shaping the legislation, but not because anybody's looking at our list and saying we're going to fund X, Y, and Z. But in terms of the kind of philosophy that the city would adopt and thus lobby for officially, were we able to put that down? And I'd like to move that forward because I think that's critical. We went through that last time. Remember, just saying that there be not only the readiness factor, but that they fit into certain categories of strategic sectors, et cetera. Do we have that in a form ready to move forward and adopt?
I believe the council already adopted that in the resolution back in December.
Thank you. All
so
right.
as the various whereas sections
Okay.
indicate specifically what those criteria are.
And as the main lobbyist, if you can just make sure to include that in our discussions on how we're conceptualizing the bills with any of the folks moving forward, that'd be great. Okay. All righty. No other questions? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Jack is not here, and he has not been here. Yeah.
Get to it.